Morning at NTV.
Well, it's a beautiful Monday outside, but inside here we're going to be having some hot debates, especially analysis of the 11th Parliament as they have kick-started their third year of tenure. Have they served Ugandans to the best of their interest? Have they served you, Muna Uganda, to the best of your interest? Well, you can be a part of this conversation. Hashtag MorningAtNTV on Facebook as well as Twitter. But we are equally streaming live this debate on NTV Uganda, that is on YouTube. My name is Priscilla Regina Naloga. Welcome to our Kickstarter, looking onto the eyes of the 11th Parliament's 2 years performance. Where do they stand right now? Would you give them a tick, half a tick, or an X? Now, what awaits them also in the third year is something that we're going to be analyzing here. But picking it up from the State of the Nation address, communicating normally to the resumption of a joint sitting of Parliament, this year's State of the Nation address marked the official commencement of the 11th Parliament's third year of operations. And in doing so, much has happened in Parliament, many laws have been developed, and the question remains, has the 11th Parliament actually served the benefit of Ugandans? Are these laws what Ugandans needed from their legislators to prioritize? Well, I'm joined by Sarah Birete, who is a political analyst, and also we do have Anderson Burora, who's the RCC Rubaga division, to help us paint perspective and maybe share with us the ears of the Ugandans he relates to on ground. Good morning to you, Mr. Burora.
Good morning to you.
How are you?
To our viewers. I think I'm fine.
Okay, all right. It's a thought, it has to be analyzed, but we're not here for the personal analysis. Good morning to you, Sarah.
Good morning, Priscilla and viewers. Glad to be here.
Okay,
yeah.
So before we heard from the President of the State of the Nation address, two things were alluded as despair for Ugandans' ears. One of them was the state of security, both on local level, national level, and regional level. The other thing was based on corruption. Now, embedded in those with what the President shared, I would like to pick your minds in what you expected him to address, and was it addressed and also in line with those two things? I'll start with you, Mr. Burora.
Well, I think the issue of the fight of corruption is a progressive one. It's not a one-off. It's a long, long journey that has not only to be by mere say of word or just mention, but in terms of policy, in terms of advocacy, in terms of awareness, in terms of criminalization, but also in terms of entrenching the initiative into perspective that it catches the big and the small, but also bridging the gaps through which corruption passes or even is given limelight. And that journey, I think, is not just a journey of a single person or even an authority. It is a journey whereby everyone has a participation or has a contribution. If we still see corruption in terms of identities, in terms of affiliations, in terms of groupings, I think there it becomes so complex that it is a little bit nagging. For example, corruption that has been cited in the political players, for example, politicians, ministers, MPs, and the others, you realize that when it comes to criminalizing, it becomes an issue of witch hunt. It becomes an issue of running after the other and leaving the other and doing so and so. And the public comes actually also to condone. In this case, not even to condemn, but to condone. There is one person who had a scandal in the Ministry of Public Service involving the pension. When investigators reached his village, the villagers stoned the investigators. They chased them away, saying that this is a very good person. Every time he comes to our area, he buys alcohol, he brings these goodies, he contributes to this and that. So they see corruption as a way of facilitation and a way of making things happen. Recently, when we were bringing some suspects of Mabati, you saw people coming up and protesting the action of getting one of their own to court and answering whatever he had to answer. So the question of corruption is a question that we need to do massive mobilization to make sure that everyone has a contribution. You see, political corruption is so sophisticated than what most people think. And it is so dangerous at the same time. It's sophisticated and dangerous, actually so poisonous that it can collapse any system when it is not even aware. And if we don't dig deeper into discussing and analyzing what political corruption is, we may end up into a very, very long and rough ditch if we don't collectively study it. Most of us are looking at institutional, looking at these statements we make, but it's much, much deeper, and it has an implication and bearing not only on the side of the law, not only on the side of the political will, but also it has a lot to do with the public itself, because it is entrenched within the public.
All right.
Now,
so
on the state of
before you go in further, in regards to corruption and also still analysis of what the president did share in the State of the Nation address, I'd like to hear from Sarah in your capacity with the advocacy that you're doing. He did mention policy in terms of fighting corruption still being weak, advocacy still being weak, and criminalization still being weak. Would you say it's the case, and could it be the one or the three things that are still failing us in fighting corruption?
I think the weakest end in our fight against corruption is the political will. Let's just take an example. The easiest corruption scandal in this country is the Karamoja Iron Sheets saga. You have cabinet involved in initiating a supplementary budget, whose purpose is clearly known to all members of cabinet: resettling the former cattle rustlers, the Karachunas. The process of enacting a supplementary budget, you have cabinet approval, you have parliament approval, you go to procurement, you procure the items, everybody is aware of the purpose. And then you have 24 ministers diverting that money meant for the extremely vulnerable people in an unstable region like Karamoja. I think what Bwana Sisi failed to mention is the fact that the citizens who demonstrated, you are saying we need the citizens who demonstrated that the ministers should be held accountable are still in Ruzera. So what citizens do you expect to come out when the system is victimizing citizens who come out calling for action against the political corruption? So I think our problem is really political. It is not institutional, it is not policy, it is not the law, but the leadership has no capacity to fight corruption. Broadly on the State of Nation address, for the first time really there was an attempt to make it broad on the economic, social, and the political state of the country, although missing some obvious issues. For me, the biggest miss was failure to honor our foreign soldiers in Somalia and even mention the way forward on our presence in Somalia. Even yesterday, there were attacks.
That case is under investigation.
Yes, true, but the people had died. At least you acknowledge. So to say that people have died, you don't need an investigation to know that your foreigners have died. I think they needed that national recognition. The second biggest miss, or what I found really a bit controversial, the president clearly came out and stated that for any country to have majority of its citizens stuck in agriculture is a sign of backwardness. Our UBOS 2022 statistics shows that 70% of Ugandans are in agriculture. So was he saying that for 37 years of his leadership he has presided over backwardness? I found that really a bit controversial. And we need to clarify, because agro-industrialization is one of our key pillars for NDP3. So if we are saying agriculture is backwardness, then what are we doing? And tied to and also is a key pillar in PDM, because all PDM investments are targeting agriculture to try to draw the 39% of Ugandans into the money economy. So are we saying that we are concentrating on backwardness as a country? Well, but another issue was the announcement of Vision 2040. He said he is not part of that vision. Vision 2040 is the basis of our national planning as a country. NDP 1, 2, 3 are anchored on Vision 2040. So if a president says he's not part of it, then what is he part of?
I think even over the course of the weekend, coming from Heroes Day, people were having that debate of 40 years in power, and for Luero, you have not really given back to the, the area that was the kingmaker for the NRA at that time. Anyway, it's a big debate, but bring it back, and focal point being the 11th Parliament and what they've done so far. I must say it's been one that's been full of scandals. For example, you do have the Namganza Essential that we had here, Honorable Zake's in disciplinary issues in Parliament. You do have the coffee saga with the Madame Pinetti. You do have the Rural Hospital. To this day, money is being dished out, but when it comes to the realities on ground, it's still another whole cumbersome debate.
Pinetti was a special guest in Chankwanzi.
Okay. Yeah. You have the Uganda Airlines that also came under scrutiny with Kosase. You do have the Uganda Railways land here in Chireka that was being owned by private people, yet it's supposed to be public land. Time for them to be evacuated, and there's demands that are conflicting. What is the reality? You do have the Nakawa land also that was a serious scandal, but interestingly that here so far in the 11th Parliament, it's one scandal that closes the books of the other scandal, not the books actually being closed by law and policy and criminalization. So one begs the question that is this Parliament really focusing on what should be aiding Ugandans, or is it a platform for MPs to be theatrical and polish their political will, as you called it, RCC?
I think given the composition of is it the 11th Parliament?
Yes.
I think given the composition, they have tried their best, and I think
when you say composition, are you talking about the many numbers?
Yeah, the many numbers. You see, there is one person who said that you can have a forest of a lot of things, but without trees. But you have a forest of thickets and grass and what, but in such a forest you may miss to actually demand a lot. And to me, in this Parliament, the only thing I would demand from it is a policy that universally impacts the people. And to me, that policy is the National Health Insurance Bill, which I think unites, bonds, and brings so many Ugandans into a perspective of having a healthcare system that supports all without segregation, because everyone participates. In South, without that, I have also seen a Parliament full of emotions, whereby even some actions from it, even the way you see the bills are passed, the way they are debated, you see a lot of emotions involved and attached to sometimes individuals, but also members of the Parliament getting also emotional. And I think that misses the point of intellect, that deeper critical thinking into the law. And most of the laws have been laws with eyes. You see, when you start legislating laws that have specific directions and directives and leaving escape routes, you cease to have a law that is binding. Because every time you see a discussion whereby if you pass a law it will catch also, it will also catch on you. Then you leave escape routes whereby culprits and other perpetrators can escape because you also left it, because you don't want it to catch you sometime. And I think that is one thing I would like that the Parliament discourages itself from taking a direction of that kind, because you may not make laws because you have left so many loopholes. The other thing I saw, I think the Zake, the Namuganza incidents were not, these are things we think would have not happened. But also I think issues to do, let me say the anti-homosexuality bill, that was for Ugandans by and large, though it has some implications. But also sometimes there is what you hold so dear to you than what you have in promise. So I think that was quite an interesting law, worth having. The Pinetti, as you said, I'm trying to go through these scandals because I think there are
quite many, my list.
Yeah, there are many, but the Pinetti case is maybe a case that might have been misunderstood. Maybe it had content in it, but we didn't give it time to peruse through it. No, the coffee. The coffee.
Where is the hospital?
The coffee. Yeah, I'm interested in the coffee because the coffee, so many farmers are earning the kill in it. So I think we may not have given it an understanding because it has more to do with processing locally and mobilizing so into a pool as one than exporting as a way out. So I think mobilizing locally initiatives to add value to process is one way. Sarah was saying that PDM, we have so many people in agriculture, but are we presiding over a backward economy?
Yes.
Yes, but everything has a foundation. There is no house that will stand firm without a foundation. Agriculture has been our foundation. Agriculture and farming has been our foundation that created the basis, so that creates the basis of Uganda as a whole, based on our climate, based on our where we are coming from or where we come from as a background of our country. So maybe what we need to involve in, if you look at PDM, PDM has about 7 pillars. And among the 7 pillars are pillars to revitalize this backward economy into one, an inclusion of finances, whereby across the board you have a very big population that is involved in a financial inclusion, an economy of money, not feeding yourself and taking care of your children. You don't care how they sleep, you don't care how they are treated or educated. Now, this pillar has also a mindset change, whereby it informs you that you don't have only to produce for eating, but for also the money, but also adding value. You see, if you don't add value, you employ someone else to add value, and he sells this added value to you at a cost. Whereas it is an advantage that when you add value, you give an opportunity to your people to participate, but also to sell at the cost that you have been buying.
Okay.
And you look at the production line, you look at the infrastructure line, you look at ICT. I think PDM has so many things that we have not harnessed. We just looked at giving out money without looking at the other facilitating pillars.
So you are faulting the rollout?
Well,
no,
you can't roll out per se because
yes,
no,
people have been saying,
and also it's
let me wind it up.
Under so much scrutiny.
Yeah,
it still has some time.
Yeah, it has some time to roll out.
Project. But while we continue this debate, we're going to be taking a short breather, and then we see eye to eye on this debate, and then we'll return shortly. Do stay with us.
TV.
5 minutes past 8 a.m. We do continue with Monday's Kickstarter, focusing on the 11th Parliament and the speech that marked the opening of the parliamentary year, the third in its term. Has Parliament delivered on its expectations when they swore in what they would do? how they would represent the people and how they would deal with the people's issues of present day. Of course, they came into this whole parliament at the backbone of COVID-19 that disrupted every single thing, right from the politics, the governance, and different sectors have been affected and have been in a place of recuperating. Now, the big question is, has Parliament supported that recuperation for us as Ugandans, both on the social level, economic level, and development level? We do continue this conversation now. Of course, where we left it off, RCC was convincing us that value addition was the way to go. But let's look at the value addition that has happened so far in the 2 years of the 11th Parliament when it comes to the bills and the laws that have been enacted. How many of them have actually been to the benefit of the wananchi, the grassroots Ugandan? Talk about the organ transplant, talk about the NSSF amendment bill, talk about the computer misuse amendment. She talked about the most recently signed one, the anti-homosexuality bill. At the end of the day, while this gives ticks for the members of Parliament for having been a part of these decisions or having put these decisions at table to be signed off by the President, have these decisions actually led to progress, to development on social and economic levels for Ugandans? Sarah?
Maybe just for the benefit of viewers, Parliament has 3 key functions. One is to make laws for the peace, good governance and development of Uganda. The second function is appropriation, like the process they are yet to conclude, the budgeting process. And the third key function is oversight. Parliament acts as gatekeepers for the citizens against impunity and excesses of the executive. So as we assess their performance, we need to assess them on the 3 components. On the legislation, a number of laws have been passed, majority of them in a rushed manner, without proper public participation. The rules of Parliament provide for 45 days at committee stage to enable public participation. Most of the laws, including the anti-homosexuality law that was enacted in 6 days, lack this component of effective public participation. And the Constitutional Court and the Supreme Court in the age limit case clearly stated that laws which lack enough public participation are found wanting. So my worry with a kind of tick box approach that the leadership of Parliament has adopted, because they are just interested in the number and not quality of laws. And the RCC here has already mentioned a bit of that on the quality. So they are rushing the process of legislation, and most of the laws are problematic. I am one of the petitioners in the Computer Misuse Amendment Act, and that's one of the components before court. The Anti-Homosexuality Act has also been challenged on the same ground, among others. So I think the leadership of Parliament need to know that they act in the interest of the people, and they should stop legislating with emotions and should changing the public in the legislative mechanisms. Is there value in these laws? I wish they had time to reflect on what we call legislative audit. Parliament needs to take time through the Legal and the Parliamentary Affairs Committee to take an audit of the laws they pass, the implications, and that would give them an opportunity to rectify some of the mistakes. Because, and I know it's a very unfortunate, in one of the proceedings of Parliament, the Speaker said, let's do our work and let court do its work. Our courts are choking on backlog. The citizens don't have money to challenge these laws. So when you legislate with the intention that let court rectify, why do you engage in a deliberate mistake to burden? You are spending taxpayers' money to legislate, and you are intentionally legislating wrong things, and you want a taxpayer to facilitate court to rectify your mistake. I think that is a bit problematic. So, but when it comes to value and on oversight, on the positive note, Parliament has been able to push back on some of the excesses of the executive, including the thuggery packaged under Pinetti. They were able to cancel the bad coffee deal. Pinetti was a special guest. I know, you know, my friend here, Anderson, said maybe people misunderstood the coffee deal. And I think that was the purpose for which Pinetti was invited in Chankwanzi, to explain her intentions on the coffee deal. But the reason the coffee deal did not make it to the State of Nation address, it was terrible backlash, because people exposed the thuggery that Pinetti is packaging for this country in Chankwanzi. And it went bad for her. She had even to run away. So when you look at some of these intentions, the gatekeeper of these excesses is Parliament. Also, the Budget Committee has tried on several accounts to try to put a backstop on the abuse, the budgetary abuse of supplementary budgets. We pass a budget which is enacted almost, because the budget cycle is complete. You finish a new budget, the budgeting for the other financial year starts. So you have a 12-year budgeting cycle. Departments have enough time to assess their needs. The technocrats have enough time to present the budget framework, in our case, which is usually presented in December, and Parliament is given 5 months to process the budget, together with the members of the executive and technocrats. So when you do a budget, and within the first 2 months, executive will be presenting supplementary budgets, including abuse of the 3% leeway, where they fund things that Parliament has not approved. Parliament is still engaged in debate on abuse of the 3% leeway. So we have a total abuse of the budget process that does not enable proper oversight of cabinet. It's actually a crisis. You pass a budget, 2 months, you are running a supplementary, the borrowing, the country does not know how to live within its means. Every day they are tabling loans, and the recent one was a loan from money lenders in Kenya. So they are unconstitutional, reckless borrowing. So Parliament has tried to stop some of these things, but maybe sometimes they are overwhelmed. Where they have gaps, it's because they are sometimes overwhelmed by a tyrant of numbers that does not take proper analysis of events in the country and end up taking decisions that are reckless.
Okay. All right. Also in the President's speech, and I'll turn this one to RCC, in regards to something he mentioned when they were in Chankwanzi, his emphasis was on health as well as education. But when you look at the priorities in terms of budgeting, allocation, which is something that is, of course, under the roles or the duties of Parliament, you get to see that there's such a big margin between the top priority in terms of budget, which is security, and then what is dispersed between what you have in education as well as health. Now, even combined together, they never really meet up or match up to what has been given to the top milker of Ugandans' money, which is security. And so where we stand right now in terms of budget allocation, where do we draw the lines and the priorities?
I think all sectors are facilitated by security. All of them. There is no education, there is no health, there is no infrastructure, there is no economy that is not supported by a strong security system or infrastructure. So the allegation that security takes, I think, a lot for nothing is an oversight in the nation. And I think that is, I have no problem with that. We have about 6 sectors that are a priority in our budgeting. Top of it is security, infrastructure, health, education, and I think there are 4 or 5, but those are the most facilitated sectors. Now, in health, I think every year enough is being done. We may not be interested in knowing the details, or we may even be demanding more than we can afford, or we may be thinking more should be done in addition to what is being done. But you see, every sector, even why besides the corruption, which is one of the key hindrances, I think every sector that is being rebuilt by this government is starting from scratch, not to add on, but it is starting from nowhere. Now, the escalation of hospitals from regional to district to health centers, national referrals, are all lacking because of the population growth, because of the development that is taking place, because of the, even I may say, the diseases now we are attracting that we are not part of our systems. So it might be overwhelmed, but I think the Ministry of Education, of Health First, is doing more than enough to escalate hospitals as a means of bringing services near to the people. On the issue of education, I think what we are focusing on is different from what we should be focusing on. The capitation grant that is sent to schools is to facilitate the day-to-day running of these schools. And they have nothing to do with the competitiveness. The competitiveness of these schools to the private level or margin, as we want to allege, is as a result of lack of oversight, is as a result of lack of monitoring, is as a result of competition that comes from the education officers in the districts who are working hand in hand with the private sector, or who also have their own schools, for your information. So the oversight, because salaries are paid by government, it is not part of the capitation grant. The capitation grant is to make sure that it facilitates the other day-to-day running of the school. The infrastructure is built by government. So what else is lacking? Because the infrastructure is there, the teachers are there. Where teachers are low, that is another thing. We can say now, let us look at making sure that we have enough teachers. But what about where we have enough teachers, where we have almost a complete infrastructure that is required, but the standards are low? Now, the participation of teachers, parents, students, and the monitors, it's where we lack. The school management committees, who also come and they get involved in other stuff that are opposed to what they had come to do. So I think the competitiveness that is in the schools is different from the funding, because the funding that is there has nothing to do. Private schools raise these lots of money to do what? Make profits. Government doesn't make profits. So whether you pay 3 million somewhere, and the capitation grant of a student in government schools is less than what you think, has nothing to do with the competitiveness. The other thing is, you go to Mulago now. Mulago is a national referral hospital, but you will find minor cases there, which is also as a lack of people who are supposed to be in Chisenyi Health Center, 3 or 4 are flocking Mulago, because we have not built enough confidence in health centers for the public to know that even if you go to health center 3 or 4, you will get this. Also, the challenges there are as a lack of oversight and monitoring.
Which all comes down to budgeting, and is all tied into budgeting.
Now, I think budget is another thing.
Budgeting is another thing. RCC has said that without security, everything else fails in the structure. And so security must take priority over and over again in the financial year in, financial year out. However, there's a debate that for security to then take priority, there must be education. For security to take priority, there there must be health. So again, it begs the question, what should be top priority? Looking at what has happened in the health sector, the 11th Parliament this time round has seen more industrious actions coming through the health sector, from deployment, which is the current issue right now, to the wages that are being paid to, you know, the health sector service providers in public. Then you look at just their working conditions. The health sector has also been challenged by COVID-19. Thereafter, shortly, Ebola came in. Currently, not spoken aloud about, but there's also measles on ground that they're dealing with.
There's also COVID.
There's also COVID.
The head of state is
that has returned, you know.
Is in isolation.
On the other side, the education sector has also come out to show the loopholes and where the challenges are, and if not addressed, it also goes a long way to break down the education sector. For example, the industrial acts that came through the teachers, and then you did have a consideration of science teachers in terms of increments of salary over the arts teachers. That debate has not been well rested up to date. Even when you look at the next financial year budgeting, the budgets have been cut. You look at schemes for education being reduced. How are we supposed to build a better future for the next generation of Ugandans if that is the state that we have on a national level?
Their services together, if together implemented well, they compose what is known as the social peace. Security, normally we look at security in terms of hardware, and we forget the software security, which is normally hinged on human involvement. So when you do hardware security, which at the moment is problematic nationally, because a nation can only be secure if you have capacity to safeguard your citizens, as well as the territorial integrity of a nation. If the territorial integrity has no threat save for the fighting in Eastern DRC and some few skirmishes, and I think on the DRC border in the northwest of the country, which are not really a big attack, but the security is on alert. But when you look at the security of citizens, already you have a screaming headline in Daily Monitor today: "Army hold police boss over murder in the city." We have guns in loose hands. We cannot account for people who hold the guns in the country. We have people in security committing suicide and shooting others, including the minister we lost a few months ago. We have this, you know, people are do no longer feel secure about any person who is armed. So when you have this state of affairs, most of it attributed to the economic crisis in the country, then you cannot talk of social peace. The other missing aspect in the State of Nation address was the state of hospitals. At the time the president delivered the address, government had disconnected water in government hospitals. You have national, you have one government agency disconnecting water and endangering citizens who are already vulnerable, who are seeking health and their immunity is low, scattered in dirty hospitals. That is a governance crisis. That government cannot talk to government to protect vulnerable citizens. We have a crisis of failure to deploy more than 2,000 medical interns for a long time. And the ratio, the doctor-patient ratio in this country is 1 doctor to 25,000 citizens, yet the World Health recommended ratio is 1 doctor to 1,000 patients. We have so much gap in terms of health personnel required to secure the social peace of Ugandans, and we are playing around. For 2 years, we cannot find 800 billion to deploy medical interns. But you have donations of 1 trillion to a head of state. You have money to dish out to Pineti. You want to give her more money. The priorities of this country are upside down. And I think the political leadership needs to reflect seriously on what they consider as priority for this country.
Okay.
I think, Sarah, you get it wrong. The issue of budgeting, you see, there are recurrent expenditures whereby once you commit, you have all time recommit to it. But also there are project fundings whereby it's a one-off. So the commitment of just saying that 800 billion, it's not just a matter of 2 years. It's not just a matter of saying you have to have a commitment that if I am to reconsider or consider this is the implication. Yes, I agree with the
is it a priority or not?
I agree there are some times where mistakes in terms of response or consideration or concern have an implication on the budgeting, most especially on those involved. And that has caused us so many problems, of which I think it should be a lesson to the framers of the budget and those involved in distributing, because there is a director who is responsible on budget. So I agree partially that there are some incidents whereby we could have mobilized ourselves earlier, most especially on issues to do with health, because those don't help. They don't wait. They are instant. I am sick now. I need attention in the next 1 or 2 or 3 hours. I can't reach to a hospital and there is no attention because of lack of oversight. And I think that is one critical area whereby all of us collectively should condemn and tell our own that this is wrong. It is wrong for national water to disconnect a hospital. You can disconnect anything, but a lifeline. Water is a lifeline in a hospital. Water is actually medicine. You can do nothing to do with medicine without water. You cannot dispense medicine. You cannot take even medicine. So means if you disconnect water from a hospital, you cannot do a theater without water. You cannot run tests. You cannot do anything without water. So I think that was very wrong for both ministries to speak, but also for Minister of Finance not to respond. But also it is a failure when we are budgeting. There are things we don't give attention to.
And the bigger question
those things are critical in however small they may be.
Would the merger of some of these MDAs actually help sort out what we are seeing today? That's a debate that we are returning with shortly after this break. Do stay with us.
At NTV.
A couple of national referral hospitals, water supply is cut off by another government institute, and yet you do have the financer of the two actually just folding their hands and not coming to quickly respond to the dire situation. One begs the question, isn't this the indicator that mergers for MDAs here in Uganda through governance should be happening now, and now? Let me turn this debate to Sarah Birete. In terms of solving all these issues that we're seeing in terms of the scuffles between finance and different ministries and agencies, is it now the perfect time to have those mergers done and dealt with?
I don't know why government has delayed the mergers. I am in total support of the mergers of MDAs as the beginning, and once these mergers have happened, I expect the political leadership also to merge their bloated structures. I expect President Museveni to scale down on his cabinet. I expect Parliament to scale down on their composition and numbers, even when it means that they are signing themselves out of the job. Because political service is not a job, it is a service. We need to merge Parliament, we need to merge cabinet, we need to merge the districts that are not really viable, that we continue to create every day. There is a plan to create 22 more cities, even when everybody knows that our government is struggling, even to pay salaries. I saw teachers on TV yesterday saying they just received salary for March, but you will see the same cabinet taking bills to increase and brought further their payroll. At times you wonder whether people are using common sense logic or not, it really defeats a citizen's understanding. So the MDS should have been merged yesterday. That's if we need. We should leave only a few exceptions, especially the constitutional entities. The rest that are not created in the constitution should all be merged back to the line ministries, and they can function as departments in those ministries.
RCC, we have seen the budget being scrutinized twice, from 50 to 50.8 trillion initially to now 52.7. Would the mergers have helped these figures be put under control for better service delivery, but also economic and social development for the next financial year?
Yeah, you see, we have fragmented government MDAs into so many pieces that they have also an implication now on the system, and that is not good for an economy that is growing. It stagnates, because much that could have been invested in social services is invested in facilitating the system to function, even when it can function without the rest being part of the system. And if all of this money is realized and put into a pool to boost the social service that we are crying for, that we think are dear to the economy and also the future of this country, I think merging, I agree, should have been here by maybe a year ago. But you see, in I think it was 2016, 17 there was a proposal that all civil servants apply, and they are on contract. Your contract is renewed.
Especially the senior civil servants.
Yeah. Permanent secretaries.
With the performance indicators.
With the performance indicators.
Yes.
That your contract is renewed based on your performance. And that had been started being considered. I don't know who plucked off.
Well, someone who was not happy with that initiative. Again,
there was
their position.
There was another initiative to put...
as you bring it to a close, because time is fast.
Yeah, I will give you two scenarios. There was another initiative to put a depot in Maraba and create a train to transport fuel and other goods to Kampala. And one train would bring down about 800 fuel tanks that flock in Kampala. And people failed, with the exception of that we have so many trailers. If you bring this train, how are we going?
That we started with, the conversation that we started
I think prioritization of whatever we must include in the budget and whatever we must plan for, whatever we must bring to scale. Turkey has about 26 ministers that Erdogan is coming with into force in this new term. But how big is the economy of Turkey? How big is the interests of Turkey? How big is their budget? And how big have they picked interest in the Google? Then we don't
Sarah,
need this
what would be your closing remarks
political structure
for us in terms of where we stand right now, 11th Parliament assessment into third year and the financial year that is yet to start?
I think for me the 11th Parliament, first of all, should rescue the budgeting cycle and cut out the abuses of supplementary budget, including the abuse of the 3% leeway that is made to help government in case of unforeseeable issues. But the way they use it, you get supplementary budget and allocate it to Sudir and Atiaka and all these other things. I think Parliament needs to put its feet down, assert more of its functioning on oversight. But two, when they are making laws, however good they are and beautiful, stop rushing the legal process. Enable sufficient public participation. You are not making these laws for yourselves. For me, that's my major call to Parliament.
Well, thank you so much for your inputs to this debate, and I trust that those of you that have been watching have picked out a thing or two that enlightens you about the state of the nation.